Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I am doing something a little bit different. I am trying a little bit of mixed media. This is about as comfortable as I get with mixed media, which is very, very basic. There are those that do very in-depth and tons of layers, and they're very good at it, and it always looks amazing. I like how it looks. I just can't achieve it myself. I'm thinking of like Sherry Carroll. She's one that does a lot of mixed media and it looks amazing. This is about as comfortable as I get here. So I have a stencil here. This is the Simon Says Stamp Star Medallion stencil, and I do have a little bit of pixie spray on it from a previous use, and I'm going to continue to use that. I have some CANSON XL watercolor paper that's about 4 3/4 by 5 1/2, and I will be cutting that down. But I started with a larger panel because I wasn't sure. In my mind, if there was sections that just didn't look very good, I could hopefully cut them out or get them to where they weren't quite so front and center so that I could put something over it to disguise it. And then I have some Ranger texture paste. This is a translucent, so it's not completely see-through, but it's not completely like opaque either. And I'm just using scrap paper so that it makes cleanup a little bit easier for me, and I can take this whole panel and set it off to the side to dry instead of trying to find something for it to dry on. I have a spatula here. This is something I think I purchased off of Amazon forever ago. But there are tons of spatulas on the market. Simon Hurley has some like mixed media knives and palette knives and stuff like that. And I've seen people really like those, but use whatever you've got. If you've even got like a butter knife or something that you use to ice cakes, just make sure you clean it off really good and use that. This texture paste has almost the consistency of like room temperature butter. It goes on super easy, super smooth. One of the things that I thought about after is, while this mixed media was still wet, sprinkling some like very fine glitter on the top of it. That would have been really pretty. You can even color this texture paste. One of the things that I just didn't even think about is the fact that the sides to the right of this stencil are open. I really didn't want texture paste over there, and so I did my best to kind of scrape that up. You can still see it in the finished card, but it's okay. So it goes on and it's kind of glossy and shiny right now. I'm just running my finger along the edges just to kind of take off some of that paste there, because that'll leave like a hard or like a sharp edges when it dries. I'm going to do one more panel the exact same way. And on this panel, I'm trying to be a little more careful about where I'm placing that mixed media so that I don't get it quite so much on the edges. And whatever I have left, I'm just scraping off and putting it back in the jar and sealing that really tight. I've had this jar of texture paste for quite some time, and I just removed that little gunky dried on bit. Normally I put like press and seal over the top of these, but I just seal this one really tight, and I haven't had any problems with it. Every other paste or gel or whatnot, I feel like they always dry out if you don't use them within like the month of opening them. I don't know if that's just my climate. Even if I put press and seal over them, I feel like they dry out really fast. And I have had this for, like I said, I don't know how long, and it hasn't dried out yet. The next thing I'm going to do while those dry is I have the Honeybee's Lovely Layers Peony. And I am going to die cut this out just from regular. This is HAMMERMILL cardstock that I'm using here. It's actually a very large floral, one leaf, and then a bud. And I have never used this before, so I'm going to just do a whole bunch of die cutting. I cut everything out twice. So I have 2 buds, 2 large florals, and then I actually have 5 because, you know, I wasn't counting apparently very well. 5 leaves. So I didn't have the layering guide for this. So I went to Honeybee's website and I looked up Honeybee's Lovely Layer Peony. And there is a section on there when that stamp or when that die set pulls up that you can actually print off the guide, the layering guide. You can print it off in color. I was lazy, was trying to save my colored ink, and I just printed it off in black and white. But this shows you all of the layers for the large flower, all of the layers for the bud, and it shows you how they go on, and it shows you darkest to lightest. So here I accidentally miscut that one, so I'm not going to show you that. So on this, and it's really hard to see in the video, I apologize, but there's like debossed lines inside this die. And that is showing you what is actually going to be visible as you layer. So anywhere that you see like debossed lines, those sections are going to be visible as you layer on top. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. I've heard Amy R. from Prairie Paper and Ink say multiple times that once you put these together one time, you're golden. Like, it's not difficult to figure out. And she's right. Like, I just kind of played with this and was looking and double checking those layers and seeing what was visible as far as like those debossed lines. One thing that helps me when layering is that I find something that's distinguished, unique and distinguishable. Is that the word I'm looking for? Speaking in words are hard sometimes. Something that's unique and very clear, like unique shape. And that's what I use to kind of line up every layer. Every time I add something on top, I go back to that unique shape and make sure that's aligned, and then I can figure out everything else from there. So I'm continuing to kind of layer all these together, just trying to get a lay of the land, and seeing, okay, well, this is visible here. Okay, now we're starting to get the bottom layers that are visible here. And I'll be honest with y'all, like, I have had some Altenew die sets. This is before they did their keyhole, like cheater method on their dies, that I just stopped using because they were so many tiny pieces. They were kind of difficult to figure out how to put together. I mean, yes, they always had their layering guides, and that was very helpful, but some of them were very, very intricate and had very, very tiny pieces. And where I loved the projects that were made with them, that I got inspiration from, I just found that they were very intimidating for me and I didn't want to use them. And that's a shame. Like, that's a shame because they are beautiful. And when I first looked at this, I was like, man, this has a lot of layers. Like, this large flower has like 7 layers. And I was like, man, I don't know if this is going to be my jam, y'all. It's my jam. I love it. I love it. This looks very beautiful. This is all the layers on there. And this looks very beautiful in white. And I almost made another card just keeping it all white. But I really had a color palette in mind and I really wanted to try it. So I'm going to put all of these back and we're going to go on to ink blending. You can color these in whatever medium you want. We're going to do some ink smushing for our background. You could definitely do that kind of method. And I'm going to be using Concord and 9th inks today. And I use these in 2 ways. I use them to ink blend, and then I use them as like a water reactive ink, because that's what they are, to do my ink smushing for my background. So I use these same inks in 2 different ways, just so you can get some more use out of the products that you have. Because let's face it, this hobby can get pretty pricey pretty quick. So getting more use out of your products is the way to go. So I have a waffle flower grit mat. This is, I think, the 8x8 version. And I am just using some blending brushes and slapping on this ink. I love that I don't have to hold on to these. I love that I'm not chasing them around. I love that I'm not applying like temporary adhesive to the back. And then I got to worry about taking that off. And is it sticking to something else? This is lovely and glorious, and I don't have to hold things in place. It's habit. As you can see here, I'm trying to hold this leaf in place. I don't have to, and that's really great. For the stems on these buds, I just applied some ink, and I wish, in retrospect, I wish I would have added ink all over this bud, or applied some of the pink ink that's going to go on top of it, just because you can kind of see the white cardstock from the side. And I am using white cardstock, but if you have tons and tons of colors of cardstock in your stash, use that. That'll make your life a whole lot easier. But this is what I had. I wanted to use the white, and I had a specific color palette in mind. I'm actually using all of the 2024 Concord and 9th release colors. That was my color palette that I chose. So I am just trying with these leaves to just add darker color to the center and then kind of fade it out as I get to the ends of the leaves. And I'm going to do that for all of these. Then we're going to move on to the flowers. First, I'm going to show you how I clean this. This is just regular water. There's nothing in it. It's just water. And I'm going to spray this down and then wipe it off with a cloth. This color does not stain, but you will see very quickly that my pink stains this mat horribly. If you are one of those that you don't like that, it does not affect how this mat functions at all, but it does affect its aesthetics. So if that is something that bothers you, then I would recommend doing your pinks and your reds on scrap cardstock or a glass mat so that you don't stain those. It doesn't necessarily bother me. I don't really like it, but it doesn't really bother me. So this WILDBERRY is what is going to stain this mat to the high heavens, and you will see in a little bit. So these are the darkest layers. Now, if you are one of those that you are just building up your stash, maybe inks aren't necessarily your thing, and you have a limited number of them, I'm showing you a tip to get more colors from a limited color supply. So this WILDBERRY is my darkest color, and I have the 2 darkest layers of these flowers on this mat. So the 2 darkest layers of the large flower and the 2 darkest colors of the bud. And what I'm going to do is the darkest layer, so the most bottom layer, or back layer, I'm going to add a very, very, very heavy hand of this ink. I'm going to add just as solid as I can get it. And I'm trying to be mindful of the parts that have that debossing that are going to show, because those are the sections that I really want to focus adding the most ink to. So this is the darkest layer of the flower, of the large flower. And really the parts that are going to show are the top, but I am adding color all over it just in case that white cardstock shows a little bit. Maybe I don't line things up perfect. I just want to make sure that there's color all over it. But again, I'm going to focus right there in those 2 spots where the darkest, where those debossing lines are. That's where I'm going to put the darkest amount of ink. Now this is the next layer. It's also supposed to be fairly dark. So where those debossed lines are, I'm going to add this WILDBERRY, but I'm not going to add it as heavy as I did on the top. And I know that this is I'm waving at you because I keep trying to hold this mat, and I don't have to. I don't have to hold any of these things on here. And I'm showing you that you don't have to hold them, and it's glorious. Anyway, so on this next layer, I'm trying to add that color, but I'm adding it to the areas where the debossing is, just not as heavy as on the top layer above it. And again, just applying color all over, but going back and forth as this ink dries and kind of soaks into the paper, because this is a dye ink, so it literally dyes the paper. I'm trying to kind of go back and check and see, okay, I think this needs to be a little darker. Okay, this needs to be this looks good. And just kind of being flexible and watching it. So on this 4th layer, what's really seen is you're starting to kind of see more of that bottom layer. So I'm trying to make sure that we get some color down there on that 4th layer, and that it's somewhat distinguishable from that 3rd layer. But again, this is the 3rd and 4th layer, so that the 3rd layer you're seeing more of the top, the 4th layer you're seeing more of the bottom. And so it's not necessarily critical that these 2 layers have a very big difference in color, but there is still some distinction between them. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the bud. There isn't as many layers with this bud, and so I'm just doing a nice wash of this watermelon color over the entire section of this bud. And this is Creamsicle. This is the color I'm going to be doing for layers 5, 6, and 7 for the large flower, and 4, 5, 4, whatever, the last layer for the bud. So same concept as that we've been doing. Super heavy layer for 5, a little bit lighter for 6, and much lighter for 7. In fact, when I get to that 7th layer, I'm essentially just like brushing this over with the lightest amount of pressure I can manage. And I'm going to show you right here. This is the white to the left and the one that I layered just the lightest hand. It almost looks like when you compare it to the other layers above it of the large flower that there's nothing on there. But there is when you actually put it next to something that is truly white. That's how light of a layer of ink I put on that layer. And then this is the final layer for the bud. And again, there's just one layer of this, and this is the creamsicle, and I'm putting a super heavy hand on there. Because usually your buds have are usually very vibrant. There's the word. Here I'm just kind of double checking that there is enough distinction between all these layers as far as how my ink blending went. Here is everything ink blended, and here they are in their order that they're supposed to layer on top of one another. And all I'm going to do is the layer that is going on top is the layer I'm going to apply glue to. We're going to start with the bud first. So I'm going to grab that first pink layer. Actually, I didn't on this one, but for the rest of them, I'm going to grab the layer that's going on top and apply glue to that. This is the one where I wish I would have applied color, at least some color all over that bud area, just because you can kind of see it a little bit. Again, I find something that is very distinct and unique, and that's where I always go. That's where my eye is drawn to, and that makes it easier for me to know what to layer on top. I'm going to speed this video up because literally I am gluing pieces of paper on top of one another, and that can get very boring, and you don't necessarily want to see me do that. You'll get the gist of it as I go. So, like I said, for this, I used white cardstock, but Kelly Taylor on YouTube, she does Copic coloring. That's her jam. I've seen Amy R. do ink smushing. I've seen Jennifer McGuire just use colored cardstock or scraps of patterned paper. I just wanted to do some ink blending because I have a decent collection of inks. That is where I have a tendency to spend my money. And so I wanted to use inks. And like I said before, I had a specific color palette in mind. And this is just kind of how I decided to color these images. But like I showed you in the beginning, they were very beautiful just in white. If you were doing like a wedding card, that would be really pretty. So this is the large flower all glued together. And I went ahead off screen and glued the rest of these together. I forgot this little section on the bud. This is the leaf on the bud. And that really does make quite a difference on this bud. I mean, it didn't look bad before because I completely forgot about this little green section here. But this little piece really does bring this bud together and make it look so much more complete. So my backgrounds are dry now, the one that we did the texture paste on, and I have used, I'm using eucalyptus and I think this is called grasshopper, Concord and 9th inks, and I am just smushing my ink pads on this Altenew craft mat, and I'm going to spray this with just some water and literally smush my paper into this ink. And this is how I'm going to apply color to this background. If you wanted it to be, I guess, less busy, you could absolutely use the texture paste and a stencil and leave it as is and add no color. That would be pretty also. For this panel, I thought maybe I ought to spray the background panel also, and I sprayed it pretty heavy. So we used watercolor paper, so you don't have to worry about this pilling or anything like that with the amount of water and inks you're putting on there. And I liked how this was looking, but as it dried, I noticed that it was very monotone. There was very little of that eucalyptus in there. The grasshopper kind of took over. So I'm just going to kind of tap this off, set it off to the side, smush this other ink panel in here, but on that one I'm not going to spray it. I'm just going to use the inks that are on here, and this next panel is even more monotone than the first. Here I just grabbed a paper towel and am trying to kind of sop up some of that water that's pooling at the bottom. But for this one, I'm just going to use the ink that's on here. I'm not going to wet it. This one is definitely monotone after I pick it up. So I heat set both of those until they were almost dry. They're still damp. And I'm just going to put that eucalyptus on here. And again, I'm not going to spray this paper because the paper is still damp-ish. But I did spray the ink, and I'm just going to smash this or smush this once again, each of these panels into this ink on my surface. And then I will heat set those one more time just because I'm impatient and I'm under a time crunch because littles are napping. And so we got to get stuff done. So I will heat set both of these after I'm okay with the variation of color that I'm seeing. So once both of those panels were dry, I did cut them down to 4 by 5 1/4, and then I went to my stash and I found ColorPlan, what's it called? Yes, ColorPlan Racing Green and Park Green. Racing Green is the dark green, and it's a pretty darn close match to that evergreen that we used from Concord and 9th. And then I found, this is the Park Green, the lighter kind of aqua-y blue color. That seemed to kind of play off of the eucalyptus fairly well. And I'm going to glue these panels flat to these 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch colored panels. And these are going to be my card fronts. And I'm going to glue these to a HAMMERMILL white card base that is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 when folded. So I wasn't sure which way to go with these colors. I liked both. I just wasn't sure which way to go with them. Tell me in the comments section below which you like better, the darker green or the lighter green as the background. So here I have decided that I kind of like this layout. I wish I would have scooted that bud just a little bit closer, but that's okay. Like I said, for some reason I had an odd number of leaves. Don't ask me why. I was too lazy to go back and cut more. So we're just working with what we got. So we have one that's going to have 2 leaves, and I'm using the green from the bud to kind of give you that visual triangle of that dark green. And then on this one, I'm going to use all 3 leaves and, of course, the bud and the large flower to create an arrangement. And then I'm going to glue all of these down flat to these mixed media panels. My sentiment comes from this Spellbinders Elegant Diamond stamp set. I'm going to use this just because, and I have a scrap of that Park Green cardstock, and I'm going to use a acrylic block and this Rainforest ink from Concord and 9th and just stamp that on here and cut it off into a strip. I probably should have used a paper trimmer, but I tried to get it as straight as I could. But you could absolutely use a die for this. You could use your paper trimmer, whatever you have. I'm going to use a Dollar Tree foam square and cut it in half long ways and then attach that to the back of these sentiment strips and get these attached to the card, and then that will complete these cards. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. I really appreciate you, and I hope you felt inspired to give some mixed media a try and see how it goes for you. So until then, we will see you next time. Bye.